Welcome to the ASA podcast, where we focus on subcontractors, the construction industry, and the issues and people making an impact. The ASA podcast is brought to you by the American Subcontractors Association and the Foundation of the American Subcontractors Association. Okay, welcome everybody once again to our series on advocacy. And today with Mike Oscar again, we're going to talk about some advocacy success stories.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, everyone. I often get heard, well, why do we need to involve ourselves with ASA National when it comes to the GRC, that is the Government Relations Committee, or even at the with our work with the Attorneys Council and our Legal Defense Fund? And I think that's a fair statement because, we try to get our message out as best as possible, but there are a lot of slips between the mouth and the cup. And sometimes I know that you're often busy. You don't have the time to read the ASA Today. That was never clearly presented to me than it was when I had to drive from Columbia, South Carolina back to Charleston, and the contractor that gave me a ride to go see the job site and to meet their chapter out there in Columbia, when he said, listen, kid, I don't have time to read everything you send out, but I like what I hear. If you put it in a podcast, I would be willing to listen. And that's one of the reasons why we've made that such a priority, such as the podcast we're doing right now and other podcasts that we've done, not only with the governmental affairs space, but in the legal space within the Attorneys Council, but also many other issues that ASA addresses within podcasts that are not advocacy related. But our success stories are many, but I'll identify four specific ones that I think are really vitally important because they're your success stories. What I mean by that is I work for you, and we have a process through the Government Relations Committee, and that process identifies issues, and there's a great debate on those issues. And from that debate and through the leadership of our co-chairs and the leadership of the committee, along with the advisement from our overall national board, we whittle down what our priorities are. And so when I first came on, very new to the job about 7 years ago, not new to the job of lobbying, but new to the job in terms of, working on behalf of ASA, we had a thing called reverse auctions that we had to confront. And this is a practice that is used primarily on the private side to not only impact the lowest possible bid, but it's worse than the lowest possible bid. And this was brought to my attention by Robert Abney, our former past president, who's with FL Crane down in the Mississippi Delta region, Tennessee, etc. And he told me that this practice is happening with a couple of stores. I won't name the names, but they use this practice where they use reverse auction to bid down the cost of the project so that the upfront cost looks like it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you did it in the regular bidding process way. And it was a matter of saving cost. So we worked to ensure at the federal level that any project that was done, that they would not use the reverse auction practice. And so we worked with our industry partners, and it was actually the roofers that came up with a very good PowerPoint presentation showing projects that were roofing related, keep it simple, so that members of Congress can, not that they wouldn't understand it or to understand it in a simpler way, but also they're very busy. So you have a short, moment of their time. You want to impact it as best as possible. And so we worked with the members to show them this roofing presentation of where reverse auction practices were used and where they were not used. And even though they thought the upfront costs would be cheaper, the back end costs became extravagant and became unruly. And so we convinced enough members to do it. But we had one member that was an obstructionist. And in the Senate, they redlined the process for certain bills that may not necessarily need a recorded vote, but can be done behind the scenes because they're considered non-controversial. But there was one member that put a hold on the reverse auction bill. And I went to go visit that senator when I found out who it was. And the reason he did that was because he was a big supporter for building the wall. And he was concerned about the cost, and he felt the government put out too much cost to date on building the wall. So he thought reverse auction would reel those costs in. So I took a moment to show him the presentation and to give him, a better understanding of why we were opposed to reverse auction. And sure enough, you may not have heard about it or read about it in Above the Fold in the newspaper, but we got 97 senators. That's a pretty hard thing to do, to agree to have this legislation. And it was raised by Senator Portman of Ohio, led the effort. He's no longer a member of the Senate. He retired. But he led this effort with Senator Hirona. And Senator Hirona is from Hawaii. And I know she has she serves on the Judiciary Committee, and she may take positions that we may not support while she serves on that committee. But when it comes to construction issues, because almost 100% of procurement in Hawaii is federally constructed, that she often works very closely in a bipartisan manner on our issues. So she, along with Senator Portman, worked on the reverse auction bill, has become law. It was tinkered. It was tinkered. I'm not going to lie to you. There's not a lot of true stories out of Washington, and this is a true story where we did have one member of the House go back the following session of Congress to allow for reverse auction for projects, for the practice to be used for projects 250,000 or less. 250,000 or more, no reverse auction. 250,000 less for reverse auction. Unfortunately, we were not successful in stopping that, but we were successful for allowing it not to happen for over a 2-year period. But then it was revised, and that happens sometimes when you do good work. There are a lot of copycatters, a lot of plagiarizers that want to use your work, and that's fine. But they were successful. But that was a major success for us. Reverse auction for 250,000 or more. I've heard, don't quote me on this, but I've heard from many of our contractors not generally doing just 250,000 or less for federal construction work. They're doing much larger than that. So this is still having a major impact. But that is one of my first successes working on behalf of ASA, and I'm very proud of it. The second one deals with bonding, performance and payment performance bonds for any infrastructure project that is a federal infrastructure project that deals with public-private partnerships. We worked hand in glove with the National Association of Surety Bond Producers and the Surety Fidelity Association of America, SFAA. Bottom line is we work with both the companies that sell the insurance and bonding, as well as their producers. And we worked with a whole slew of the construction industry procurement coalition members to ensure that in the Transportation Infrastructure and Jobs Act, that was signed by President Biden in 2021, that any transportation-related projects that deal with performance and payment bonds for public-private partnerships, that the private side is bonded as long with the public side. Because what was happening was, on those public-private partnership, the public side had bonding requirements due to the Miller Act, which has been in place for over 100 years, but on the private side, it was not. And so we corrected that, and that has had a major impact for our contractors who have done transportation or construction infrastructure-related projects to ensure that they have the provisions in place for performance and payment bond, so that they know going on that job that the general contractors, that is the primes and the subs, and that is the government, knows that they have people, A, that can perform the work, B, they're legitimate actors, they're not unscrupulous contractors, but they can perform the work and they can actually pay on time. And that gives a reassurance to everyone in that circle of trust that the project will be successful. So I'm very proud of that. And we're working very hard to do that same work. And I thank all the people that came in for our fly-in this past year, because what we're trying to do is get that into the WRDA bill, which is the Water Resources Development Act, because we got it in all infrastructures projects minus the Army Corps projects dealing with locks and dams and wastewater facilities, et cetera. So we're trying to implement that in that legislation. That's usually up every 2 years. So, and then we'll have it in both, all land, air, and now sea if we are successful. But land, air, and is covered within the TIFIA. So that's a tremendous asset that was passed. And again, you may have heard about the infrastructure bill, but you may not be aware when it comes to those public-private partnerships, because a lot of infrastructure projects at the federal level are now taking private money to buttress the work that's being done at the public level, because as you know, our budgets are never done on time, nor are they done in a fiscally advantageous manner. So there's got to be money, because there's a lot of aging infrastructure in our country that needs to be addressed. And so having that private funding coming in and having those protections in place for our subcontractors is vitally important. And so that, you know, you can see now with our first victory and our second victory, they're directly involved in procurement related matters. These are not ideological issues, but they affect our bottom line. They affect our payment. And so those are the issues that are our sweet spot that are vitally important to our subs. The final, the third one, but the final of the three that make up the three-legged stool in terms of our procurement related issues is change order reform. And we've been working on that consistently now for many years to ensure that if 50% of a change order is complete, 50% of that change order should be paid out. And we've been working with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, along with both chambers, to make that happen. We've had an effective testifier through Andrew Christ, who I've highlighted in these podcasts, but also has been on our website. We've talked about him, but he's a federal contractor, works primarily with the Air Force, and he has been dealing with an outstanding change order that started out at close to $250,000 and now has continued to rise as high as $1 million of not being paid. And so we're working very closely to address that issue with Congressman Peter Stauber, who I've mentioned before, who is who's the author of the Small Business Payment and Performance Act, to address this issue, along with Senator Ernst, Republican from Iowa, to address this issue on the Small Business Committee. And we've had Senator Hirona from Hawaii has been helpful to us, a Democrat, along with Congressman Veazey, a Democrat from Texas, and Congressman Peters from California, and other Democrats. So we work in a bipartisan perspective, because these, again, are not ideological issues, but they are contracting reform payment issues. The final one deals with workforce development, and that's near and dear to many of you because we're constantly dealing with those challenges. And that deals with 529 college savings plans. And what we were able to do through the Tax and Jobs Act of 2017 is to ensure that we tinkered slightly with 529s. If you have students or sons and daughters, grandsons and nieces and nephews that decide they don't want to go to college, but they might want to get to an apprenticeship, that law allowed for, now it's coming up for sunsetting next year because it's an 8-year horizon, but currently for the last 8 years, if you had a 529 for a college savings plan, you could use that money for a registered apprenticeship program. And we're very proud of that. We can take that money to supplement the cost for equipment, for training that you're able to use for your apprenticeship program. And we also were able to get included in that home care, daycare provisions are included in that funding, can be used in that funding as well. One of the members, Congressman Don Norcross, gives a very good reason for that. He's a IBW 98 member from the Philadelphia region, but he is a member of Congress, been in Congress now for close to 10 years. But he remembers what it was like. He was going through a divorce. That's the story he told in support and why he drafted this legislation. He worked in bipartisan manner with Congressman Meehan from Pennsylvania, Congressman Mike Fitzpatrick, not Brian Fitzpatrick, because Mike had, Brian took over for Mike's seat. But bottom line is, the point I'm making is that he remembers going through a divorce, very hard to find daycare at 4:30 in the morning without his parents, who had to be on job site at 6 a.m. And if he had to pay out, if it wasn't for his parents, he had to pay it out. Well, as an apprentice, you know, you don't make enough money to cover that. So that's one of the reasons why we were also to include that language in there, so you could use that funding. So if your son or daughter, grandson, niece, nephew, whatever, decides not to go on to college, but wants to go into the apprenticeship program, we worked very hard, ASA did, the team did, I should say, in making sure that now that funding could be used for apprenticeship training programs, and that came through the Jobs and Investment Act. So there's 4 successes that have happened in the last 5 years that I believe have had a tremendous impact on all of our members, 20, almost 3,000 plus. And if you're not aware of these, then I failed you on my job to get the message out. But please look at our website. Please look at the ASA Today, or contact me directly, which my information is on the website, so I can tell you more specifically about these successes and others that I haven't identified that we worked on your behalf. We work for you. Your voices are heard, and we try to be as effective as possible. And I know you hear a lot of noise outside the Beltway about nothing getting done. But these are 4 provisions, 4 success stories that got done despite that noise. And I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of our team that did that. I'm very proud of the members that worked with me from ASA to make that happen. And now it's up to you to come join us and get engaged, as many of others have, and keep the passion going, keep the game going, and please call upon me anytime.
Yeah, I that's the impact and support of members is crucial here. You know, they bring the information to us, and they get engaged, and, you know, you and your team go out and do all this work on their behalf. And I think, you know, when you talk about the benefit again of a national organization, I know we've said it before, it's this, you know, it's the strength, it's the power in numbers that we have. And so that's why it's so important, I think, for the members to get involved, and for them to understand, you know, what ASA National and what your team are doing on their behalf. So I'll just echo what you said. Get involved, call Mike and his team, go look on our website for the contact information, or to find out, you know, they do, Mike mentioned in previous podcasts, ASA Today, which is a weekly advocacy newsletter. You can always stay informed of what we have going on. Our monthly Contractors Compass hits a summary of those issues as well. So we are, Mike and his team and the rest of us at ASA are trying to make sure that you are all informed. And we love the help. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So Mike, thank you again. Thank you to your team for all this great information. And I look forward to having you back on the show again.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the ASA podcast. For more subcontractor-focused content, visit us at asaonline.com and fastcares.org. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.